after they've been consulted or not. And my view is, don't put these things on your CVs. And if you have put it on your CV, take it off. But that's, and the other one is about predatory conferences. Is this a big problem? Absolutely a huge problem. I thought there's a bit of light relief. And then there's Professor Ollie Daube. So I'll read you this. This is, Ollie in many ways is a typical dog. That's her. She, in front of the computer, she likes going for walks and chasing birds, and is especially fond of having her tummy rubbed. That in one respect, this Staffordshire Terrier differs radically from her canine peers. She has a burgeoning academic career and sits on the editorial boards of 7 medical journals. As you may have guessed, the journals on whose boards Ollie sits are all of the prairie kind. These are shadow online publications, etc., etc. Then, Ollie's owner is Mike Dalby, Professor of Health Policy at Curtin University in Perth. Ollie likes to watch Mike working on his computer, and Mike gets a lot of emails from predatory journals, sounds familiar, even down under. Wondering just how low these journals would go, he put together a CV for his dog, detailing the research interests such as the benefits of abdominal massage for medium-sized canines, and sent it off to a number of these journals asking for a spot on their editorial boards. Remarkably, the vast majority accepted Ollie without a mirror, and their name now adorns several journal websites. Ollie is a trailblazer, Professor Darby says, being the first dog ever to get on the editorial board of a journal. I just say lawyers. And then says what makes it even more bizarre is that one of these journals have actually asked Ollie to review a paper. Yeah, just some light relief, because I mean, some of this goes to extreme examples. There are now, by the way, so many attempts by academics to establish whether particular journals are in fact predatory. So they are kind of sting operations, and started with Bohannon and a few others. I just want to say something about the impact of the NRF. I've also, the last 2-3 months, have been involved in a number of discussions with people at the NRF at their evaluation center and the rating system. That's Joyce Ulife's unit. And some of you will know that the NRF came out with a statement in January. This is a quote from their statement on predatory publishing. It's on their website. And that is after, in the sense, we had discussions, Gansen Pillay and myself. What's happening is an indication of how far the impact of predatory publishing is reaching. Since last year, beginning of last year, what the NRF has discovered is that when people apply for ratings or renewal of ratings, that they've discovered in some cases that on the list of publications there are publications in predatory journals. Now, one is because the NRF doesn't have a clear policy how to deal with this. They didn't really know how to deal with it. So they're treating this on an ad hoc basis. The second thing is that, remember, the NRF rating system is not clearly aligned with the DED subsidy system. The DED list is not what the NRF obviously uses. So to give you one example, a senior professor from University of the East Coast submits for a rating. He has an extensive list of publications, last 5-6 years, 40 publications. They've shared with me in confidence the correspondence, and that's why it will remain anonymous. But it's an indication of about 100 such cases now the last year. And so he submits for rating, it goes out to the reviewers, it comes back to the review panel says, hang on, 14 of these 40 publications appeared in predatory journals. So what do? Then after long deliberations, and you can see that the panel doesn't know exactly what to do because this is a precedent, they go back to him and says, our recommendation is that you withdraw your application for rating. So he comes back with a 3-page letter to say, what the heck is predatory publishing? Who are you to tell me that this is this? It's a fascinating letter. I mean, someday, he says, I've worked my life to put on meals on the table of my family, and he goes on like 2 pages how dedicated he is, works through nights. Now you tell me, and you are now, attacking my reputation. The point that I want to make here is that we mustn't underestimate the impact that this could have on people's careers and their CVs and their reputations. So you have to be very careful how you deal with this. So, I mean, I said to the NRF, the last thing that you must do is, you can't name and shame these people. First of all, every single one of those 14 papers that appeared to predatory journals appeared on the IBSS list accredited by the department. This person, like so many of the people on this list, all these 3,000 papers of predatory journals appears in the IBSS list. None of them did anything legally wrong. They didn't do anything wrong in terms of submitting it for subsidy because these were subsidy accredited journals. Their mistake, if anything, was to be susceptible or to not be sufficiently suspicious about why they were being spammed and why they, in some cases, would get publications so easily published. But we'll talk about that at the end. Okay, so this is enough about the paper and the impact. So what happens after Beale, beyond Beale? There are three things that this comes to my second half of my paper. One is that given that Beale has disappeared from the scene, it doesn't mean that they are not new watchdogs, new organizations and people that are trying to take over the watchdog role, so I'll just refer to that briefly. The other thing that happens is that the scholarship about predatory publishing and related ethical, unethical issues is just burgeoning. I can tell you there are now so many papers being published in this field every week, and it's difficult to even keep up to this, up with this increase in publications, and it shows you how widespread it is across the globe. And I will, that's where I want to refer to one specific point. And then I want to get to talk about understanding the deeper issues, because predatory publishing is just a symptom of a deeper malaise in publishing. So, continuing the watchdog role, I'll just, when you get this, you can look at this. I'll just open, I hope that my Wi-Fi is still on. There are now new websites. I'll open Stop Predatory, if it opens. This is not a very comprehensive website. Let me see if it opens here. Yeah, sorry. Oh, it's not showing here. It's showing my machine, but it's not. It's a website that actually has both the Beale list of journals and the publishers. So it's not projecting from there, sorry. But you can type that in and follow that. I'll just skip the second one for a moment. Predator versus Academator. I have no idea what that's probably just a made-up name. But that's also an interesting website because they have more information about misleading journal metrics. There's now a big debate. Do we need more blacklists or do we need more whitelists? Now, first of all, it's an unfortunate set of terms in a political culture where we don't really want to juxtapose white and black. So let me just say, I think that, in fact, we had this discussion at the NRF, where the NRF is very sensitive to now talk about blacklists and whitelists. But the director of open access journals refer to their list as a whitelist. That's a list of legitimate journals. Now, so people are now saying, rather than taking the route of trying to identify whether a journal in which you should publish is a predatory journal, try and identify the good journals and for your students and publish in those. So take the opposite approach. There are websites that list fake journals. Cabell, that second one that I skipped, is an interesting case. It's a big company that has been set up, I think, in the UK. But you have to pay to get access to their products. And let me just say, not a little bit of money. So Marty, my PA, sent an email and said, can we subscribe to Cabell's Cabell list? Because they have a white list, a black list, and a whole range of other products per field and so on. Yeah, for a small amount of $48,000, you get an annual subscription. So I saw one comment on this saying, now, this is now people trying to make money out of predatory publishing. But what I also saw literally 2 days ago, a much more positive review of Cabell's list by one of their former employers, but it looks like a fairly objective assessment. What they say on their website, if you look, is that they have a team of people that are applying a set of 60 criteria So a much more comprehensive attempt to classify journals that has ever been done. Now, if that turns out to be valuable and correct and valid, then it may be a good tool, but the cost is fairly prohibitive for individuals and even for universities. So we had an interesting discussion yesterday with Garrison Pillay from the NRF whether we can't get a license of that and then set up a similar system. So that's early discussions, but we think that it's worth investigating what criteria they are using and see if we can't start a similar alert service at Quest for the sector. So that is that. Now, on improved scholarship in predatory journals, as I said, Bill has been, over the years, been criticized by a lot of people. In fact, he also was criticized by just being against open access publishing. I mean, unfortunately, he said things that suggested that equated the two, and of course they're not the same. There's a link, but predatory journals and open access, you can't just say that, as the CNN said, there's no moral equivalency about that at the moment. So one paper that appeared by Peterson last year, which I have taken the liberty of quoting quite extensively in the next few slides, has summarized what I think is a really good set of criteria. So I'm just going to go through that very quickly. How you identify predatory publishers or journals, and this can become tips to young scholars. So what is interesting in the paper is that he takes the word predator very seriously. He refers to evolutionary biology, terminology, and say, according to Endler, there are 5 stages of predation. Detect the prey, identify the prey, approach. Think of a tiger, think of a cheetah. Get a prey, the buck. Detect the buck, identify the buck, approach the buck, subjugating it and consuming it. So I thought this is lovely, a nice little bit of a conceptual framework. And he focuses on his paper on the approach stage. He said the detection happens quite easily, but it's the approach where people now get CFPs, calls for papers. And these are the things to look out for. So he, the approach strategies speak, well, first of all to say, because the entire operation of predatory open access journals appears online, the most common way that you would be approaching is through a CFP, a call for a paper, or invitation for a paper. And obviously you would have been identified because somewhere in the past you published a paper and they get your email address from some, or they harvest Google or whatever, so they get email addresses. Now, I'll just look at a few things. So common features in the approach strategies. What do you pick up when you get the names of the journals, the location of the journals, the subject of the journals, something about fast publication, something about abstracting and indexing, and then 6 and 7 I'll talk a little bit. So now this is, these are quotes, let me just again say, I'm literally cutting and pasting here from his paper because I think it's useful and you can read the paper. And in his paper he summarized a huge amount of scholarship, so this is not just Petrosov. So when you get titles that have words in the titles like advanced, scientific, be careful, scholarly, peer-reviewed. No self-respecting journal calls itself scholarly, peer-reviewed journal of medicine. So just be, leading publisher, whatever. Crawford found that there are 74 Indian journal of, that's a lot, 247 titles starting with global, the global journal of philosophy, the global journal of whatever. 176 with typed open journal, research journal, etc. Then there are even titles that overlap, scientific research and essays, standard scientific research and essays, or international journal of scientific research and essays. So, first point is we say to young scholars, but also established scholars, look at the title of the journal that is inviting you for the papers. If it doesn't make sense to you, be suspicious. Point 1, that's look at the journal name. Unfortunately, it is the case that a huge percentage, somewhere between 40 and 50% of these journals are located in India, followed by Pakistan, Nigeria, Iran is now increasingly. And then there are journals that say that they are housed in the UK, USA, but these are fake addresses. If you click on it, it actually the one thing that Beale did quite a bit was he would click on it, you get, it's somewhere in Connecticut or whatever, and then you say, okay, you click on the page fees, and you get the name of a bank in Greece. You know, so be careful for that kind of stuff. Journal subject. The one thing that we know, I mean, even young scholars should know this. Journals specialize in the field. There's some multidisciplinary journals like Nature and Science and so on, but most journals is a journal in a particular field. So what you see with a lot of these journals is that they span across different disciplines. Journal of Biomedical and Life Sciences, Chemistry and Material Science, Computer Science and Communication. That's one journal across all those fields. Or we've seen things where they even say the Journal of Humanities and Engineering. You know? The people in humanities don't even talk to the people in engineering. So the point is, when you see things where people, the title of the journal combines journals from very disparate disciplines, you, again, another red flag must go up. Fast publication, that is very often, because this is what they're preying on. They're basically preying on the publish or perish imperative. So what Predatory refers to, he says, the International Journal of Emerging Technology and Advanced Engineering mentions in its CFP for Volume 5, Issue 2 of February 2015 that the submission deadline is February the 5th and the publication date is February the 20th. Cannot be. The Indian Journal of Research, which I'll show you later, says that in 3 days it will be published. Now you see, again, use your common sense. The top journals take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. I mean, what is fueling this let me just say what is confusing people is that there are now mega journals like PLOS ONE that produce fast turnaround with good reviews, peer reviews, but they have 500 peer reviews on the journal. So this is what people say, oh, hang on, if PLOS ONE can do that, why can't every other journal do it? But they can't, because these other journals consist of one person behind a computer. That they don't have hundreds of peer reviews. So abstracting now, that, by the way, requires a little bit of knowledge about publishing system and indexing system, because you will get, in predatory journals, typically make far-fetched claims about we are abstracted and indexed in these systems. Now, if they claim that the journal is indexed in the Web of Science, you can go check it. You click on the library, you go to the Web of Science, look at their journal list, is it there or not? Because if they say on Scopus, you can check it. Scopus and Web of Science generally for 99%, not 100%, but for 99%, does their own checks, and those journals you can trust. But when they say we are indexed in Google Scholar, that's rubbish. Google Scholar is not a database, it's a search engine. Google Scholar harvests everything in sight, so you will see a lot. So when they say we have been indexed, like there's been some process of quality control, that doesn't happen. But the worst case is when they start referring to fake journal metrics. There are essentially just two good journal metrics. There's the journal impact factor produced by Web of Science, Thomson Reuters, GIF, and there is the SNP indicator, standardized normalized impact factor for Elsevier and Scopus, which are produced by our partners in Leiden. All these other things like a global impact factor, GIF, there is no such thing, colleagues. Just said. They would say our global impact factor is 4.35. That's rubbish. There is no such company that produces it. The universal impact factor. Can you just imagine that? So that's why when you see these fake metrics, and actually recently I got this request from the Indian Journal of Research, and it says its impact factor is 5.761. SJIF. There is no such. In bibliometrics, I can assure you, that is not a legitimate impact factor. They are making this up. And my problem is that when I see a first lie and a first deception, I get skeptical for everything else they tell me. And here you see they've been indexed with leading international indexing agencies like Index Copernicus, rubbish. Google Scholar, not really. OpenGate, iSource, these are not legitimate indexing services or products. And then, of course, you look at some of the other things that they say. And this is why I say publish your article within 3 working days in the May issue. So there's so many telltale signs here. You just said that you know that this is a journal that's not worth publishing. The interesting thing is that now with invitations to conferences they resort to all kinds of nice flattery. So Petrosol has a number of examples. This is one example. It says where someone has been invited to a conference in geoinformatics. First of all, we would like to congratulate you for your consistent and incessant efforts till now in the field of what? Being aware of your eminence in the related field, we cordially invite you for your valuable contribution to your journal. So they use a lot of stuff. I actually got this one last week. I thought, so, Director Tom, greetings. Hope this email finds you in best of health and spirit. Very nice of them. We take the privilege to invite you to address us as the honorable chief guest. You know, this is like a political rally or something. And, so, I mean, that's where I stopped because, you know, even my wife didn't call me that. I'll let you Maria about this one. So they do, last few comments. One thing that, there's some things that they don't tell you. It's not just what they tell you. One of the things that you have to be careful is that if you want to find out whether a journal is a good journal, you go and look at the editorial board. Is it representative of countries in the world? Do you see some top leading scholars in your field? And a lot of these journals, you can't get to the editorial structures. You can't get to the editorial boards. Or you get the other extreme, because now people pay to be on the editorial board. They're invited to sit on the editorial board. That's great. I mean, people can now pay $50 for some journals to sit on the editorial board. And that just goes against good publishing practice. So some journals like have 400 members of the editorial board. But these are people who pay to put it there to add that name in the seal. So you can't imagine the similarity in logos. What they now do is, these are just 3 examples of 3 journals. On the left-hand side, you have the legitimate website logo, because they hijack journals. One of the things that they now do is they hijack journals and they change it slightly. On the right-hand side are the logos of the predatory journals that have been hijacked. I mean, it even looks some colors, you know, from a design point of view. And then something which is really interesting is that when you start to look at this, they put this under the subjugation. Subjugation is when you end up paying for something that you don't get. And something that's quite interesting now, which is on the rise, is the increasing use of business advertisement terminology to get you to submit the paper. And here's an example now. There's now reduced. Really? You know, last week it cost you $500 to submit a paper. Now there's the discount. This is like checkers. You could submit your paper now. Okay. So I very briefly, just another 10 minutes, David, I think, and then I'll be done. Just going back to our study of ASIF. The whole study is not just about predatory publishing. Unfortunately, we discovered other forms of unethical practices by South African journals, and I'm just going to show you 2. And we think that this is just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. So there are 2 journals, and some of you will recognize these Bern journals. We were completely astonished to see that the journal in which South African academics have published the highest volume of papers in the last 10 years is this journal, the African Journal of, well, it's now called the African Journal for Physical Activity and Health Sciences, ASPES. Before 2015 it was called ASPERT, African Journal for Physical Health. It is the single journal in which South African academics have published the most number of papers, nearly 3,000 in the last 10 years. The second is the South African Medical Journal. I couldn't believe my eyes when we did the analysis. What is about this journal? You know, it caters for people in physical education, sports science, recreation, dance, stuff like that, nursing. So now to tell you, this is where we started. I'm not claiming this is a predatory journal because it doesn't charge huge APCs, but I'm claiming that this journal is engaging in very unethical practices, I think, and not for the reasons that you may think. I'll come to that. But this is when you get suspicious. If you see the output in a journal growing at these rates, you have to ask yourself, how do they manage the volume of papers? Because they were publishing about 60, 70 papers 6 years ago. They've gone from 70, 60 to 320, and I can tell you in 2016 it's even more in the same. So how does an editorial team probably one or two small people, how do they manage a process where you get a 5-fold, 6-fold, 7-fold increase in publications? Do they have enough peer reviewers? Is there enough time? Do they have 3 reviewers per paper? Suddenly for 300, do they have hundreds of reviewers? How do they even manage that? But we think that they don't do proper peer review. So we did something else. We looked at where are these papers, what are the affiliations of the authors? Well, the university vendor published 647. Out of the last 5 years, 640 papers from one university, followed by Northwest University 250, Pretoria 228, Limpopo 277. That's not the interesting thing. Is who published these papers? Well, if we do it by university, the bars in this bar chart that are green are papers by members of the editorial board of the journal. So 18% of the journal published over this period came from Univen. That came from the editor and other editorial members and Northwest. And in fact, this is where we put the names in the report because we think this is public knowledge. You can look it up yourself. It's an online journal. You can check this. So I don't know these people, but the two things struck me. One author, Professor Surajal, who used to be at VUT and now at Northwest, has published 113 papers in the last 10 years in this journal, actually mostly in the last 6 years. How do you get 113 papers as a single author in one journal? Professor Amusa, who unfortunately died last year, was the editor until last year. He has published 58 papers as the editor in the journal. And the new editor is Professor Toriola, who also published 58 papers. And it gets even slightly worse, because we looked at Professor Surijal's papers. In 2010,